Okay. Well, I'll introduce first Chris Ruggieri. You're the Senior Information Security Engineer at Hibbett, among so many other things. 17 years as an enterprise manager of IT and security services, 20 years penetration testing, 5 years mentoring and public speaking, MIS degree from UAB, and concentrations in IT management, web, mobile development, and information security. Known Chris for a while. I've really enjoyed getting to meet you through InfraGard, and your perspective on things is always refreshing.
That's a polite way of saying weird.
Yeah. So, and then next to Chris we have John, and again I apologize, I didn't know. Of course, y'all have been listening to me all week. You know I don't usually do intros anyway. But John, it's nice to meet you with Wood & Associates. Served 8 years in the Marine Corps. Thank you. Graduated from Auburn University with a BS MIS, and have worked with the food service, banking, energy sector, municipal education and services, and legal IT services. Currently, business engagement is a private residential. Currently, business engagement in a private residential publication. Is that right? Okay. Oh, there's more. I didn't get to page 2. There we go. Oh, wow, you go all the way back to IBM OS2, 286 from Coke. Wow.
Yeah, I have a long history.
Long history. And then Doug Drew, because I want to get right into the panel. Sorry about this. Doug, Senior Solutions Engineer at Nucleus Security. Career cybersecurity practitioner, starting from circumventing security controls in college to getting my homework done through today working for a is that a polite way to say you were hacking to get your homework done?
No, I needed to install software to get my homework done in college, so I just broke the security.
So that's a polite way to say it was like Kobayashi Maru, right? You just got around the...
I didn't want to lose.
Exactly, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, none of us like to lose.
Yeah, I like your bio, by the way. It's like mine, very short. Just, yeah, okay. So, gentlemen, do you have we don't have a slide deck, or do we?
Yeah, we do.
We do?
Yeah, very short, but yeah.
Are you taking turns presenting?
It's more conversational.
All right, so y'all got this worked out. I'm going to shut up. Okay.
You sure?
You want me up here? You want me down here for Q&A?
6 of 1.
I'd rather get off the stage.
So I tried to pick the least scary photo of me for my profile. Some people would say I failed. That really is the least scary photo of me. Now we've broken the ice with a little self-deprecating humor. If you look on the right side, it's the joke meme that I'm sure we've seen a couple dozen times over the past 2 years. What drove digital transformation at your organization? Was it the CEO, CIO, CTO, or COVID-19? Answer is always COVID-19, or almost always. So we have all of these companies, Apple, Google, Twitter, Facebook, Microsoft, we're all going 100% remote. Now you have Apple and Google that are saying, nope, RTO, time for everybody to come back to the office. That started the headline wars. Work from home fails. All these managers are saying, no, well, we're either going to cut your pay or fire you. And then you have a whole lot of employees that are saying, no, go ahead, find out. This is not going to work out well for you. So the question has become, what are the options truly? Because when everyone hears this, they think, everybody's on site, everybody's working from home, some kind of a hybrid. There is a fourth option there. We'll get to that in a bit. So I'm actually going to hand it over to, speaking of the options, I had to pull that. That was just too easy. Joke kind of wrote itself. Turn it over to John. He did a nice little SWOT analysis on the on-site version.
So, can y'all hear me outside of me naturally speaking? So when it comes to on-site, effectively, most of the older generation, we know the strengths. You can see people, you can interact. We know that one of the weaknesses is if you live in, anybody here from Atlanta? Or been to Atlanta and worked from? There's a reason why you live in Birmingham, right? So everybody knows Atlanta, and that's just 10% of what it's like working in New York. someplace, and other big metropolises. So drive time is always an inhibitor in some markets. Some of the opportunities for on-site is you get to engage with your leadership, whether it's your direct report, whether it's their report. You're enabled to actually see them, interact with them, be it at a conference table with them. Another great opportunity is spot meetings. You can basically, I can walk up to Chris and say, hey, can we have a breakout? I need to talk to you about some specifics. Emergency meetings, it's kind of like an opportunity, but it's also a threat because you have those 11 o'clock hour alarms that come on in any organization, both pro and con. So, again, some of the analysis of the on-site is the company is effectively responsible for the security. So you come on site, they have to have the physical security checks, all the checkpoints, the badges, all of that. Marginal additional resources, I say marginal because you're going to have them one way or the other. When it comes to remote, the company and the employee are both responsible, meaning the company's security is only as strong as the device the employee is using. If they're using their personal desktop, is it fully patched? The company can't necessarily engage a patch management tool against their personal device, and of course the answer is give them a company device and then you can manage it. But you're also having to buy another device. So now you have two devices for one employee. Again, additional resources. You're talking about VPN, MFA, RSA, laptop terminals, VM boxes, alphabet soup for any number of additional resources. I did a little CIA just to kind of bring a joke into the security conference. So typically the 0 is going to be smack dab in the middle, and then you've got layers of 2. Nothing's perfect. On-site is more secure. Again, I'm taking the devil's advocate for on-site. And of course 10 is the high capability. So it really depends on the organization and the employee and how they implement it. That's y'all.
Yep, that's us. I'm actually going to go back one, and I'm going to throw a remote over on you.
So I've been remote for 18 years. The last 2 years were some of the toughest because I had coworkers again. My wife and my 6 kids were at the house, and I could not find a place to work to save my life. I really wanted an office to go to the last 2 years. But being an early adopter, I've gotten to see the ebb and flow of a lot of change in my life during that time period. And a lot of what I liked or didn't like really depended on what was going on in my office, meaning my house. When my kids were little, I really wanted an office a lot more. When they were a little older, I really didn't want to go back to the office because I could walk out at lunch or at 5:02 and spend time with them. And that was wonderful. And then it's varied again. I would say that I understand the perspective here, but mine is not necessarily the same. You say that it's more secure being on site. I assure you, there are people at my workplace that I don't know, but I know everyone who's in my office. And if I've got a stranger there, I will address that quickly.
Yes.
Usually with a very large caliber.
I agree with you that...
Your home falls under the castle law, so...
Again, large caliber.
And I got a large backyard and a bulldozer. So,
Who needs a bulldozer?
well,
have
there's
a garden.
hogs. There's hogs, yeah. But,
Snapping turtles.
yeah. So, I would say that I agree completely that BYOD is challenging, right? Mm-hmm. But honestly, it's as challenging in a workplace as not, other than that I have a little more control over, ingress, egress path.
Right.
If I'm providing those additional resources, as we've moved to the cloud or cloud services anyway, whether that's, OneDrive box, whatever, I have egress control, but if, what is it now, 90% of internet traffic is encrypted? Unless I'm doing man in the middle, I've already lost some of that context, even if I'm on site, because those resources are not controlled by me. So I think that we've got a changing landscape to address. I think that we've got to be concerned about the cybersecurity implications. We have to be concerned about the management of productivity and efficacy for meeting, like you've discussed. And I see that both ways, right? Like the company that I work for, we're remote first. We live and die on Slack. And that's great, except when Slack's down.
Yeah.
Email.
Right, sort of. But we don't even adapt to that well. We're a pretty young company, and so email is a construct that is not preferred. And then the third one is employee retention. You know, there's the good of remote. The good of on-site is that you get that collaboration, you get to know people, you build relationships. I think that's wonderful. I've got some people in the audience that I've known for many years and had an office with them briefly, and then we both were remote but worked together a lot in town. And I really enjoyed that.
Yes, and so first off, let's put this whole premise. All three of us are for hybrid.
Yep.
I had to take the devil's advocate approach and go for on-site.
I refuse to take the on-site.
I introduced the headline wars.
But it's really all about, well, let's go to the next slide.
Okay. So then we have the hybrid approach, where it's basically quote, the best of both worlds, where like Hibbett is in this situation right now. Legal disclaimer, anything that we say is our personal opinions, blah, 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 you get it. This is my week in the office, our analyst is at home. Next week is my week remote and he's in the office. Before I go too much further though, I want to ask one question. Pre-COVID, how many organizations, how many people here had all of their corporate employees on a laptop? I see one, two,
3.
So I have one question. What would you do if your building was a smoking hole in the ground? What was your business continuity strategy with desktops? There isn't one. Those laptops are your business continuity. If that building, instead of a meteor crashing down, it was a microscopic virus that basically had the same effect as a meteor turning your building into a smoking crater.
Or backhoe.
Or
Instead of physical damage, it was microscopic damage.
exactly. So that's where I think I'm coming from anyway on a hybrid, or I'm going to get to the fourth option in just a moment. A lot of managers are saying that, you know, hybrid's the best of both worlds. The problem definitely comes down to choice. Which of these options do you choose? Well, if you have 77% of managers, which, let me go back a few. That one, if I'm pointing, yeah. Fed up managers saying work from home's over, 77% say they're going to either fire you or cut your pay. The other half of this problem, too far. You have 83% of employees saying, you tell me I have to come back into the office, I'm out. So why are we fighting about it? There is no blanket one, this is where the fourth option comes in. There is no blanket one-size-fits-all policy that can work. Whether you agree with them, disagree with them, the vaccine mandates taught us one thing. No one likes being forced to do anything. Does everyone agree with that statement? No one likes to be forced to do anything.
Ideas so good they have to be mandatory?
It's good, actually, really good response to that. So don't force 100% remote. There are some people that can't handle that isolation. Mental health became a massive problem during the lockdowns. So 100% remote, you can't force that.
You know, I'd like to interject.
Go ahead.
This may come as a shock to a lot of us here, but there seem to be a fair number of introverts in the IT industry.
I was actually about to mention that. Paul said it on Wednesday.
And I saw something, it was on social media, and it said, remember to check on your extroverted friends. They're not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Some people need that.
Exactly.
Well, and to kind of further go on that, quick show of hands. How many of y'all are self-extroverts identify as, well, we'll get onto the identification, but who identifies as an extrovert? Okay.
Oh, good, I'm not the only one. Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see.
Okay,
We
so
got God's
I'm going
flashlight up
to
here.
take it through the process of the void and say that everybody else is an introvert. Of those introverts, how many of y'all can work with other people? Okay. Extroverts, how many of y'all can work by yourself? Okay, then y'all are not extroverts.
Ask it,
wrong.
but add the modifier well.
True. How about that? Work
Okay.
well by yourself.
No.
Okay.
So,
But the point is that extroverts, and that's what we're seeing with the mental health, is that the extroverts like the idea of working remote because they could stay at home. They didn't have to do the drive time. They didn't have to go to downtown Atlanta. The reality is that they needed that social interaction. As an IT person, historically, I can work well with others, but I kind of exceed by myself. I can do extremely well by myself. I don't need other people. So that's where we're kind of going into, is that that's what this whole work from home showed us, is that some people just need that social interaction, which leads us to our fourth option.
the fourth option being give your employees the option. A great example actually happened to you a couple of weeks ago when you had all the renovation going on. You had sawzalls and pneumatic nailers going on. It's really hard to have a meeting when you're doing that.
I had plumbing from my kitchen dripping onto my desk. I really wanted an office.
And believe me, we understand that not every position, and I'm using that term intentionally, can do any kind of a remote or hybrid option. If you work in logistics or a distribution center where you have to have hands on boxes to put them in crates, or doctors, nurses, bank tellers, there's no way that's going to happen. But marketing, merchandising, accounting, IT,
Public relations. In some sense, management.
some sense management. And you see some of the, I hit the wrong button. You see some of the people that are putting these out, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Forbes, Computer World. They're all saying the same thing. Choice is what's critical. It's the same principle as unlimited PTO. Statistically, a company that offers their employees unlimited PTO, their employees take less time off. Their employees are happier. Happier employees, better productivity, higher retention rates. Don D said it this morning. There are 500,000 open cybersecurity jobs right now.
You know, it's not just retention either. Mm-hmm. It's talent acquisition.
Yes.
And remote helps with that, right? Because if you say, I want the best people within, a half-hour drive time, that's a different thing than saying, I want the best people.
Now you're expanding your talent pool.
And you've got to be able to acquire talent. And in a tight market, you need to be friendly to doing business. My company, the one I started with in January, and during my recruitment process, I asked about travel and so on and so forth, and he said, we're remote first because we found that we can get the best people or we can get people here. And we are too small and we are growing too rapidly to afford to do anything other than to get the best people.
Yeah,
But-
you can either have a warm body
Yep.
or you can have the best people.
Well, but what's interesting though is that they give me travel budget and hotel budget for 2 weeks a year, no questions asked, to come to headquarters or to meet with others in my company to get some of that face-to-face time and interaction. That's that fourth option.
Exactly.
And for me, it's wonderful. So we're based in Jacksonville, Florida. There's a hotel that I can stay at that literally there's a balcony over the St. John River. And then I walk 2.5 blocks to the office and get a cup of coffee on the way and sit with our founders and my peers, and we do all the collaboration stuff. And I have to tell you, going there this February as a chance to get to know people was fantastic. But I really needed that FaceTime, and I built some relationships with our product management team that I would not have done had I not had that option.
Now, where management a lot of times has a butting heads moment, the 77% versus the 83% is, Oh, well, how do I know if they're actually working? Well, how did you know before COVID? Key performance indicators, KPIs, goals, deadlines. Well, if those KPIs, goals, and deadlines weren't in place before COVID, you're not going to be able to measure it.
You weren't measuring it then either.
You weren't
Yeah,
measuring
you
it
weren't
then.
measuring it then. Yeah, you're not going to measure it now.
Now, the problem comes in, and you actually brought up a really good story during lunch, is focusing too much on the quantifiers of KPIs.
Yes.
Go for
So I historically have a background in software development. Back in 2006, I did a study inside the development community, and Google was, surprise, surprise, one of the forefronts. And their solution was that every developer had to commit so many source control commits. Anybody here have a development background? Okay. So you kind of know the source control is kind of the way we basically version everything. Well, their first gut reaction was you need 100,000 commits a day. Okay, that's the quantitative. Mm-hmm. The problem that they started seeing is that their support costs were going up. Even though they were having the quantity of commits, they weren't having the quality of commits. And that's where we need to understand is that the KPIs are not numeric in the total sense when it comes to on-site versus remote or any hybrid of the two. The key performance indicator is you need to know how they perform. Some people I've worked with, they were developers, highly performant, but they were 11th hour developers. Some of their best work was produced in the 11th hour. Mm-hmm. And then you have some, they like to make sure that they basically front load their work and then they kind of slack off at the end of the project. But they were quality, but they just did everything, they front loaded everything instead of at the end. So that's part of the KPI is if you put this against an average person, you're going to fail half of your employees because everybody is unique. You need to know their KPIs.
So my favorite one about that is, I got 1 foot on fire and 1 foot in a bucket of ice. On average, I'm good.
Yep.
And that's, but I know people like that. Do you need some pressure and deadline? And does that inspire you? Or are you somebody who says, I just want to get it all done, but the problem there is you think, okay, great, I've made my commits. My manager sees my commits are going down. I can be assigned extra.
Right.
That is one of the flip sides of that.
Right.
There's also what if the employee is chosen remote and now they're not meeting those KPIs? Well, that's when management can take that choice away. They can reevaluate that. But if you don't offer it at first, and here comes the warning shot across the bow, your employees are going to go somewhere that does.
Yeah.
That's number one.
There's that curve between retention and employee sat and productivity goals that are metrifiable and measurable.
Exactly.
And I will put one caveat is Chris and I had talked about this. There was a situation, I want to say it was Cisco back before 2010, so it would have been under the Bush administration. They had a developer that was employed with them fully remote. And he had a VPN to his desktop inside the company.
I remember this.
And he was the highest performing developer in the organization. He got promoted all the way up to VP of software development until the security team started evaluating his network performance. At which point, they started noticing that he was remoting into his desktop at 1 o'clock at night. So that would be 0100 to 0100. And so then they started evaluating the packets. And they found out that between about 11 o'clock, I think that was out in Houston, so that would have been what, Mountain time zone?
Houston's us.
Houston's still central.
Central? Okay, so from about 11 p.m. to about 4 a.m., he was highly active. Does anybody know who's up at 11 p.m. to about 4 a.m. our time?
Not the U.S.
Exactly. That was the point, is that they found out over the last 7 years through his career with the company, he had been remoting in during that time and was the most productive because he was getting paid $70,000 and he was paying them offshore rate of around $20,000, $30,000, and they were doing all his work. Just saying,
Oops.
that is part of the KPI in knowing the person.
And that goes back to there is no blanket one person or one
One size fits
solution. Yeah, one size fits all. Thank you. That was the word I was
Well,
looking for.
and once you've bucketized a role, that doesn't mean it's not going to change.
Exactly.
Somebody doesn't have kids, they have kids. Somebody, they're
Life
Life changes,
happens,
yeah,
right?
right.
You know,
Life happens.
Anybody here ever had a parent or grandparent who needed some care, right? Or we know someone who has, right? So what you might see there is they need to go remote because they have to do that. And what's the chance if they don't remote? They quit.
Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, you need to make sure, right now that's one thing that we're finding is that people are choosing family over companies.
Yes.
Yeah, but then what happens 2 years later? Their situation changes, maybe that person has passed. They don't want to be in that house right now because they have a memory and a personal social cost that they've paid against it.
Right.
And so for them, now it's I want to be in the office every day. I need a distraction from all the things that I've just had to do.
Or it's just like it's the grandparent analogy where your grandfather still works all the way up until his deathbed because he doesn't want to come home and see his wife, 24 hours a day. I'm just saying, but that's the same basic principle.
Why do you got to make it personal?
But that's the same. I mean, some
Well
people
played.
need to get away from the house because it's just, if they're in the home, they want to do dishes, they want to clean clothes, they want to vacuum, they want to sweep the floor, they want to weeds, do the weeds during lunch. But this is part of that whole hybrid and the fourth option.
And there's also a cost to that. Like I said, you have some people, if they're remote, they may not meet those KPIs. You may have other people that I like to call dogs with bones, me. I'll log on at 7 a.m. and I suddenly look down and it's 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and I don't know where the day went because I've just got into that zone and I'm there. From management?
That's not good for you, though.
From management, that is a 90-mile-an-hour head first into a burnout. So we kind of have to watch that as well with any remote or hybrid or choice option to make sure that psychopaths like me don't work ourselves to an early
and-
grave.
But that may be your norm.
Yeah, it is.
That's not the company norm.
Oh, yeah,
Again, it's
definitely.
the burning hot cold.
Yep.
Is the company average, but that is, you're like me, if I'm on a project and I need to get something done, I need all noise gone.
Oh, I dream in code.
And I'm just going
Yep.
until it's done, and then I come up for air, and then I'm good.
So the company that I'm going to talk about right now, and I'll be very brief, is no longer in business, so I can actually tell this story now. I worked for a West Coast company 18 years ago. They were a startup, and they had a mostly no remote policy, and I knew that, and I had to manage against it. And I knew that my manager was going to be questioned about my productivity by his management chain, the executives. And so being a technologically minded person in terms of solving personnel challenges, I will replace you with a script if I have to, I would schedule emails. I would come home, and I was in school full time, and I was working about 60 hours a week, in addition to being a newlywed and trying to take care of all those things. So what I would do is I would come home, I would study, I would do some homework, I would schedule some support calls or some commits, and I would schedule those emails to come out between midnight and 2 a.m. my time, West Coast obviously between 10 and midnight, and then I would sleep for 4 or 5 hours, and I'd get up and I'd do a little more, maybe another commit or two, schedule another couple emails to come out at like 6 a.m., but I'd be asleep. But it would look like I was productive. Like I did not sleep, I did not rest. I was an amazingly productive individual. What I did instead was I'd burst work, be really productive, really focused, really fast, cat nap for 3 hours, do the same thing. But from his perspective, all the metrics that he could have, he was asked, he told me, he said, I was asked once, how do you know these guys work? And he said, are you kidding? This guy's handling support cases 18, 20 hours a day. Well, my actual work time was probably about between 6 and 8 hours to manage that in my college workload. But I knew how to beat
The
the KPIs.
Yeah, because it was quantitative, not qualitative.
Precisely.
Yeah. And so if people want to game the system, they're going to. I would say that in that case, you don't have a technology problem. You don't even have a workplace problem. You have an HR problem.
Almost a cultural.
It's a cultural HR problem, and you have to solve it that way because you either can hire people you trust or you've got a problem.
Yep. And that's going to be the case regardless of which option, which of the four.
Yes, I mean, and that is the end result is if you have a quantitative metric that you're trying to gauge against. When I teach my students, I have intentionally a subjective evaluation to anything that they put because all students know how to game the system. If you say, I want 3 words, they're going to put 3 words. If you say, I want 3 responses, they're going to do 3 responses. So employees or team members, management, they're all going to learn how to game the system. When I worked in food service, we knew how to game the system to the point that we could say, we could falsify our drive-through times by simply checking people out early. And that's effectively what you did with your scheduling is you knew that, oh, I needed to have this stuff done, so in order to meet that, here's my schedule.
I was going more about the software that you had to install in college.
Well, that's a different story for another day.
Yeah.
No, we won't talk
Much
about that
longer
one.
panel.
It was that they received federal dollar, which means statute still applies. We don't talk about that.
Okay.
Talk about what?
Exactly. But the thing is, it wasn't that I didn't want to be productive. I loved that job, and I needed it. And I needed that job because I had 3 companies close under me in a 5-year stretch. I was not going to lose that job, not at a startup, not on the West Coast, not in the security business where I really was getting to do what I'd wanted to do since that day when I was 18. And I was not going to screw that up. But I couldn't do that job in the way it needed to be done while meeting the rest of my obligations. And so I had to figure out how to accomplish the goals, deliver the metrics, and not crash my car into a guardrail because I fell asleep coming home from the library.
And to that point,
Yep.
if you can do that, if you are still meeting those qualitative KPIs, goals, and deadlines, why do I care if your butt's in a seat in a cubicle or if your butt's in a lounge chair on a beach in Tahiti?
Well, assuming you have connection in Tahiti, but just the same.
Can I get the job done?
Yeah.
Can the job get done? I don't care where you are.
Now, I will say that I think there's value in face-to-face. I really, really do. One of the things that I would like to see companies do, if they're going to allow a hybrid model, is have some required on-site, unless you've got a reason to not. But I'd like to have it structured and incentivized. Hey, third Thursday every month, we, have ping pong tournament and collaboration, and we provide appetizers. Give me a reason to be there. Because even the introverted among us might like to go in and say, I really need to see and talk to John or Chris or
Why would
Sue
you want
or
to talk
whoever.
to me? Nobody wants to talk to me.
Dude, I don't even work with you anymore and I call you.
Okay, why'd
So-
you point me out over there when I'm over here?
I didn't want to single you out, man. Jeez.
There's a lot of,
But
John's a much more common name.
I think that we need to have a reason for people to be there, right?
Right.
Because if we don't have a reason, we're not, but we know that there's value in some of those ad hoc interactions. So create a reason for us to be there, and you may get a chance to have lightning strike.
Well, one of the things that I definitely did want to talk about is typically, in my observation as a business consultant, whenever I deal with we're talking about 100% remote, I've observed that these companies typically are 2 layers. You have the operational system, and then you have the leadership. And that's the only 2 layers we have. With a fully on-site, you typically have a pyramid, for lack of a better reference, pyramid scheme. But you have it
Yeah, I'm not touching
where there's rank and file structure in the organization. And typically that's historically been centered around monitoring, evaluating, making sure somebody is in that seat, and I get that. And a lot of these online organizations, they have a flat model. So that is one of the struggles that we're going to come into is there's no vertical growth for the employees. They may go from a junior to a mid to a senior level, but they're never going to go into a VP position because there's only two positions. There's the leadership, i.e. the owners, and everybody else, okay? So we need to understand that when an employee is coming in, you also need to elaborate more on the vertical growth, not just the horizontal, because on a flat structure, it's only horizontal. So,
No, I would challenge that with Twitter. I mean, Twitter and Facebook
but they
are,
have an office. Well, and
they're
Elon
not-
Musk just bought it, so
Well-
we don't know how we don't know how flat it's going to get.
that's on hold right now.
It depends on how many people are left.
I know.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Well, I mean, they could be in space,
Yeah, Twitter could be the next thing that gets taken out by a solar storm.
Right.
but
So Q&A, please be interactive. You guys have listened to us yap on long enough.
Yeah, I've got a couple from online, and one of the questions is the first three options are work from home, work at work, or hybrid. What is the fourth option? And I stepped out for about 10 minutes, so I don't know what the
Gotcha.
fourth option is either.
Is don't make the choice for your employee, give your employee the choice.
think of it like insurance benefits. You don't tell them one insurance policy. You give them 2 or 3 or 4. Same basic principle. You say, okay, here are options.
But isn't that hybrid?
On your first 3, it's the company making the choice. The
You will
company
be
is
remote.
saying,
You will be in the seat. You will be here halftime.
Yeah.
that's the company making the decision. The fourth option is take the company out of it, out of the choice, and give the choice to the employee.
Provide more flexibility.
So that's assuming that hybrid is mandated, where you can only be in the office a certain number of days.
Or to say that we normally have a policy of we're 100% remote. I'm going to go into the office twice a week because they're working on my house and I need a quiet place to be.
Right.
Or
whether it's a co-op center.
But
or
6 weeks from now or 6 months from now, I need to be in the office all the time because my marriage is in a bad
No,
place. This is not actually true, by the way.
I was going to
makes
say, I know your wife.
that makes sense, and I wasn't challenging your premise. It just seems to me like if it's optional, then hybrid is you're allowing either way. And I thought maybe the fourth option was go get a bunch of AI.
But
Nice. So
with a hybrid, there's more of a structure. Like with Hibbett, we're on an every other week.
okay, so that's a
the
forced.
That's the
That's a
the
forced
first
hybrid.
section of the
Yeah,
hybrid.
that's the
it's
forced
like
part.
the every other week, or 1 week a month.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fourth option is the employee option.
Yes.
Which
is the company says, hey, we have these available services.
It's kind of a work for your day kind of thing, or basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if you get, and this goes back to that head first into a burnout scenario. If you get everything you're supposed to get done for that week done by Wednesday,
Sure. Yeah.
that's you.
Okay.
Or in your case, when you're working 3 consecutive 14-hour days, if you're in the office, your manager
Obviously.
might say, I don't want to see you the rest of the week.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got a really good one here, and then we'll go to the audience here. But
Yeah.
going with the remote work option, do you think the company should pay the associate based on their location? I'm going to simplify the question. In other words, are you paying
Yeah.
Los Angeles rates in Birmingham?
So I actually had I wrote an article about this about 2 years ago with, oh my God, and I just forgot her name. She was the CISO of Aviva over in
Anyway,
the UK.
you wrote an article.
But she actually brought that up. No, I don't see that happening. That's the short answer. I do, however, see salaries across the board averaging out a little more, cost of living in Los Angeles coming down some, cost in Birmingham possibly coming up some because of situations like this.
But that is a problem.
Yes.
Because there are organizations out on the West Coast, up in the Great Lakes, and up in the Northeast that if you work in New York or Chicago or LA, you'll get $80,000 a year, for example. Obviously, we're not accounting for anything. But if you are out in BFE, North Dakota, you get $20,000. That is going to be a problem. You're doing the same work, and you're getting
Initially.
different pay.
Well, and then you're saying the inverse of that is where they're coming in, because in the professional firms,
I'm saying initially on that
Right.
because what's going to end up happening is that situation starts to occur. Companies go, oh, if I start hiring in the middle of nowhere, North Dakota, or the middle of nowhere, Alabama, Asheville, 2,300 people, and it's 2,296 more than I want. You're going to have people flooding out of those large cities because all of the companies that are in those large cities are now hiring in the rural areas for much lower. Well, at some point, you're going to have to hit that equalization point.
A couple things I'd like to mention too. So that when I said 18 years ago, I was working for a company out in California. They needed coverage to cover people who could talk to Europe, and had a customer in Africa. And when we were negotiating on compensation, they gave me well, it's cheaper for you to live. And I said, stand up an office here so that we can have somebody talk to Europe on your behalf and tell me that I'm more expensive. And
That's a good point.
that was valuable, right? At the same time, my wife is an executive for an American car repair company. And she had an employee who was living in a tiny little house in Philadelphia and just had a baby. And she got permission to be remote and moved to South Carolina for the same compensation. They were able to buy a house. They had space for her and for the new baby, and they needed that. And they didn't have to change compensation to greatly improve circumstance. And so for that person, it was a raise to be able to do this.
Yes.
Without changing the dollar in the equation at all. They improved satisfaction and retention. It's not a one-directional thing. We should be paying to get happy employees that we can retain who are productive.
Because that's the end goal, is the happy employee, the higher productivity, and the better retention.
You could be super well compensated living in a tiny little box and hating life.
well, I question if the corporations that we work for are taking the money they're saving on square footage and investing it back in cybersecurity where it needs to be for work from home. Did you have a question?
No, I do agree. I have a different question, but I will respond to this, and that is, it is great to think that you could continue to pay people at a higher rate, but some of us will immediately take advantage of the fact that I'm now an empty nester and I'm going to move to a little tiny island somewhere earning the same money, but now I have issues that when you say, hey, we need you to come over and come into the office, and I realize, oh, there's not a plane out for 3 days. Yeah. So some people would take an option that they would be so far remote that would actually become an issue of them being able to communicate or have the proper connectivity they need.
And then I'd say they're not doing the job.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Right.
that
Exactly.
goes back to the
And-
gaming the system that we were talking about.
Exactly. So there's a little limit there. But the thing I was going to bring up, though, is that when you work remote, and I've done that for many years, I'm kind of hybrid right now, mostly in office, that it's important in companies, and it's a problem. I work in DevOps, so for me, it's to make people run their operations more efficiently. Communicating, training, getting people more involved in their jobs so that they could not be replaced, but that their IP and their intellectual property they bring to the company is shared with the company and not only in their head.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But that also allows them to grow and share with others and promote the tasks and work they're doing. You can do that better in the office in a lot of cases, and it becomes a really big point of leadership and operation management when you have somebody remote to find the employee who gets stuck and doesn't ask questions and sitting there remote, doesn't say a word, and when finally you say, it's time to check your KPI, are you done? And they're like, I'm still stuck from last week.
Yeah.
And you have the resources in the company to answer their question immediately and get them started again. So the interaction with employees who are remote and helping them to grow, respond, and be involved with other employees, online meetings and other things, is extremely important, because if you abandon it, then you've siloed them somewhere and their KPI drops, and it's not because they're not capable, it's because the company doesn't know how to manage this resource and help them grow remotely.
And you just hit it. You just hit it with the company not knowing how to manage that particular situation.
Paradigm changes, and we in management have to change with it. But here's the thing, it's hard.
Change
Being
is
a
always
good
hard.
manager is hard. and we have to work at it.
It's easy to be a manager, it's hard to be a leader.
Yes.
Well, it's hard to lead people you don't see. My management style, I call management by looking over people's shoulders. You can't do that over Zoom.
No.
You can't even do that in Slack. The person who's not being productive and doesn't know what they're doing doesn't know what question to ask. They don't know there's a better way and that they're doing it a horrible way. But when you are in an environment where you have that direct interaction, and I think the thing I would point out is that a lot of the things you guys have been talking about are great for mature senior people in the organization. Almost all of my employees are still college students.
Yep.
I have 110 students working for me. And when you sent them all home during COVID, it's a very different environment when someone has never done this job before, it's their first month perhaps on the job, and we have 2 weekly meetings where they can ask questions, but they don't even know what to ask.
So the way that I solved that about 10 years ago was whenever we had new graduates, we always paired them with a senior. So that way, they could always rely on that senior no matter what, to basically a mentorship program for the new graduates or the new employees that are the juniors, if you will. Because if you don't assign them a partner, they don't know who to ask. Whereas when you assign them with a mentor, that is their person to ask, and if they should be with they should know enough about the organization to know who to ask if they don't have the answer.
And you may have to deflatten, right? We go back to more of the little more management stack, a little more of the pyramid, to help people in that environment have a path. Knowledge-based, good enablement, and training, right? We have to provide enablement for people to be good at their jobs, because when we have the daily interaction, we can at least learn the way we always have tribally, which is by observation of others in similar tasks.
Exactly.
When we don't have that, we have to provide focused, designed instructional management and enablement.
And that doesn't just go for recent graduates or even current college students in the roles. That really should be for any new hire, because you're coming into an environment that you have no idea about. So the evaluation of those KPIs, the evaluation of those goals on a new hire, a graduate, a junior, those need to happen more often so that you can catch those things of, this person's stuck, let me partner him with somebody because we can see that he's stuck a lot sooner.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the long and short of it is we're going to have to solve this issue because it's not going away.
The
Pretty
answer is 42.
The answer is 42.
The answer is always
And
42.
the genie ain't going back.
Yeah,
Hang on.
the economics of it are
went too far.
that we're all going to be in a hybrid environment,
No, I didn't go too far.
and we're going to be competing with.
You're going to give somebody a seizure.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh,